having done that sort of work for about 20 years on the other side of K, and before that I was a management lawyer. But the thing that I discovered, quite frankly, in the context of academia from, K-12 through the university level, is that folks aren't in it for the big bucks, and that, there aren't evildoers so much. There's a few, but, in that side of it, that people want to do what's right for kids. And as long as you talk to them about what it is that they need to do to help an individual child or a group of children that are not getting the education that they deserve, that they're open-minded about making changes to try to accomplish that. What this panel is about is what can we do in our own lives as lawyers that will allow us to make a difference in the achievement gap. And, not focusing on it from, going into it as part of your 9-to-5 business, but what can you do to add on? Because all of us are busy. All of us have to work 50, 60 hours a week. I have a family. I have, all kinds of other responsibilities, other civic interests. But what can we do either in a big way, like some of our speakers have done, and we're also going to talk about what people can do to get your toe in the water, to do something for an individual child to help them advance and help the achievement gap, and then maybe expand it. And I think that Kay pointed out that one of the purposes of this conference is to try to get lawyers more involved in education. So I'm going to start with our speakers, and although I had highlighted all the very impressive credentials for the Honorable Jimmy Edwards, he said not to use any of them, and just to introduce him as Jimmy, because he wants to spend all of his time talking to you about what he's done in addition to being the chair of the circuit court.
Thank you very much. Lock them up, throw away the key. Those that advocated the Safe Schools Act in 1988 through 1995 got it wrong. They simply got it wrong. The Safe Schools Act, zero tolerance. They don't deter. They don't rehabilitate. They don't work. Leave no child behind. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. We all embody the hopes of children known and unknown. The best means of success is education. The achievement gap. Two main reasons for the achievement gap. You heard a little of it yesterday. The school to prison pipeline. We all know that one. But what you might not be familiar with is the unaccredited school problem. School unaccreditation. In my state, the two major public schools. The two major public schools in the state of Missouri, one in Kansas City, Missouri, the other in St. Louis, Missouri, are both unaccredited and have been for several years. Yet, children in unaccredited schools are not permitted to attend school in adjoining public school districts. That's a problem. That is a problem. And if you have not confronted the unaccredited school district in your state yet, it's inevitable. If you have not confronted the school to prison pipeline in your state yet, you haven't looked close enough. It's there. It exists. You as attorneys have a lot of opportunities to help. I am happy to report that all over this country now, judges are being educated. We are being educated that we have an obligation to get involved and to become activists. Activists for children. You see, just a few weeks ago, I was up in New York with former Chief Justice Kay. 300 judges. The theme, keep children in school and out of court. Just 2 weeks ago, I was in Texas. The theme, keep children in school and out of court. And in June, I will have the opportunity to keynote the National Association of chief justices and presiding judges in St. Louis. We expect over 700 judges. The theme will be, you as a judge have an obligation to lead. Now, our greatest asset, the greatest thing that we as judges can do is to convene. See, we don't have any other powers, but we have that convening power. Back in 2009, in March of 2009, seated in my chambers, I opened up our local paper, and there it was in my face. School board will be closing schools in the city of St. Louis. And I said, what a wonderful opportunity there is for me to get involved. As the chief family court judge in the city of St. Louis and presiding over the juvenile courts, I had about 35 children that had been the victims of our Safe School Act. The youngest was 11, the oldest 16. Out of school, expelled from school with nowhere to go, yet Missouri is a state that requires education, a compulsory education state until the age of 17. So how were we educating our children? Well, we were providing children with 3 hours of educational instruction per week. And the rest of the week, that child was roaming our communities, engaging in criminal activity. And I thought, wow, that begs the question. Either I can leave them out on the street where I know that they are a menace to our communities, or I can put them in a school building and educate them. Teach them how to read. Teach them how to behave. You see, I was being a little selfish too, because I know that it's just a matter of time before I became one of their victims. We can either modify that behavior when they're young, or we manage that behavior when they get older. Education, I thought and believe, is the key. So I opened up the Innovative Concept Academy, not a charter school. And I heard a lot about the school this morning that was a charter school. I know a lot about Jeffrey Canada School, which is a middle-class school. But I wanted to open a school that impacted the achievement gap. Because the gap is not necessarily impacted when you have kids that are chosen ones. The ones that are in the middle, the ones that are upper class. I had the poor kids, the kids that are having an impact on your communities, which are negative mostly. And so those were the kids that I needed to address. Those are the kids that are impacting the achievement gap. So the Innovative Concept Academy was born. Not a charter school and not a public school. Cannot be a public school. Why? Because I was allowing children to come into our school that had been expelled. Children that had been expelled. Children that were invisible to our school board. Children that are invisible in many instances to conferences like this. As I said in the room this morning, I listened, I said, Jesus Christ, those are not my kids. Those are certainly not the children that I see. We don't talk about college. Not yet. See, at 17 and 18 years old, they can't read. Get the parents involved. Mama can't read. Grandmama can't read. Great-grandmama can't read. The parents are dysfunctional. The achievement gap. Well, we have to do something to address it. It makes sense. But I understand that it's not all about reading, writing, and arithmetic that impact the achievement gap. I have children that we take on field trips. Our field trips have nothing to do with the local zoo. We have a wonderful zoo. It has nothing to do with the art museum, the arts, or science fairs. Our field trips or to the local business office so that our children can get on an elevator and ride an elevator. See, because in many instances, it's the first time that they've ever been on an elevator. We're talking about the achievement gap. And so it's exposure, positive exposure. In many instances, my children, when they commit offenses within a mile radius of where they live. You push them outside of that radius, and if they're in a stolen car, they'll park the car and they'll sit on the curb and they'll wait on the police officer to arrest them so that they can take them back to their neighborhoods. In many instances, the first time that my children are ever lawfully in an automobile is in the back of a police car being brought to me. So I thought that we would develop this school, a community school, not a public school, not a charter, but a community school. I have 45 partners, wonderful partners. I have a great faith base. I have Muslims. I have Jews. I have nuns. I have Baptist preachers. They're there for a purpose. You can't teach them unless you can control that behavior. You can't close the gap unless you can control the behavior. I have a partnership with our police department. Our K-9 unit have 2 dogs. Their names are Kilo. It's a wonderful name for a dog, don't you think? And Georgie. They're part of the school. Why? Because when kids come into our school, the dogs tell me whether they have drugs or not. Not because I want to arrest children, but because I want a drug-free environment. You see, I go to the school at 8 o'clock in the morning. I get on the bench at 9 o'clock in the morning. I return to school at 12:30 in the afternoon. I go back on the bench at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I go back to school at 5. Our school for some of our children don't end until 9:30, and we start at 9:10. Because I believe that there are 3 pathways to criminality, and that's a whole new conference. Too much, no lack of parent supervision, too much idle time and economic constraints, but that's for a whole other conference. But we're there at school, and we have to teach these children, and we have to socialize them before we can close the achievement gap. The assumption too often that we make here is that these children have a basic understanding of what it means to be decent, what it means to be responsible. They don't know a noun from a verb, and they're in the 12th grade. So at our school, I give them a 1st grade textbook. And we go back to the 1st grade. We go back to the 3rd grade. And we teach them. See, in my mind, it makes more sense that they read at a 6th grade level by the time they graduate high school as opposed to not being able to read at all. So we go back. I don't judge them, and I don't embarrass them. If you can't read, you can't read. And so we focus on basic things. Of course, I would expect and want all of my children to be able to compete within the highest ranks of all students all over America. But I know sometimes that won't happen. I asked our children to give me an effort today, better than you gave me yesterday, and I'll applaud you. Yes, I have great expectations, but you see, at my school, we paint 1 dot at a time. I get 1 dot painted, I applaud them, and then we move to the next dot.